It seems like 2024 was a polarizing year within the video game industry. And the reason I say that is because on one hand, you had a lot of people like lose their jobs and get laid off, and you had studios shut down, and you had that horrible Suicide Squad game that came out last year. But then on the other hand, when it came to actual releases, there was a handful of good games that came out last year. And honestly, when you look at like video games that stood out from last year, I'm talking about games like Astrobot, Metaphor and Fantasio, Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Um, you had Tekken 8. There was a handful of games that came out last year that people really liked. But I wouldn't say it was as star-studded as 2023. And some people think 2023 is overrated or whatever, but I think 2023 is one of the best years we've had thus far in relation to high-profile video game releases. As far as 2024 is concerned, a lot of people have been wondering who is the best video game publisher of 2024, and there's a list that was created by Metacritic that ranks all the best video game publishers of 2024, and they had Sega ranked number one. And I think it's mainly because of Metaphor and Fantasio. That game was way better than a lot of people expected it to be, and I think that game had gotten like it got like a user score of 94, so it's a must play, and it had gotten like an average meta score of like 83 or whatever, and you gotta remember, I mean, Metaphor and Fantasio is a game that was created by Atlas, the same developers for the Persona series. So it really doesn't surprise me that that game was that good. But you got to look at the fact that we also had games published by Sega that came out last year, like a Dragon Infinite Wealth and Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance. And the games that I just mentioned, they all did like over 1 mil in terms of sales. And and honestly, like doing over 1 mil in sales is actually considered to be really good in this day and age because it seems like a lot of video games can barely go over like 3 or 4 million in terms of sales. And I feel like that's a part of a larger yet unfortunate trend that's going down within the video game world. And is that something that I agree with? I think it's something that I think a lot of people would probably agree with, but at the same time, there are some people who might disagree with it and say that, Bandai Namco had a pretty good year as well because they did release Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. They came out with Tekken 8, which ended up being the best fighting game of 2024. And they came out with Gundam Breaker 4, a game that no one really talks about as much because I don't think that game got like a ton of mainstream attention. I know for a fact Tekken 8 and Dragon Ball Sparking Zero got a ton of mainstream attention. And I honestly feel like that the games that I've just mentioned so far were among one of the reasons why 2024 was actually, considered to be somewhat decent in relation to high profile video game releases. And as far as like the Metacritic list is concerned, Capcom was actually ranked number two, and their best game from last year was Dragon Dogma 2. And I think that got like a meta score of like 88 or something like that. And that was a game that, in my opinion, got overshadowed by a couple of other games that also came out in 2024. Ranked number four was Sony, and I think that's mainly because of Astrobot, because I think Astrobot had gotten a Metacritic of 94, and it was basically a game that appealed to casuals. It didn't appeal to young adults or anything like that. It was basically just a action adventure platform game that kind of reminded you of some of Sega's older IPs back in the day when when Spyro the Dragon and Crash Bandicoot was popular. And the thing is, like, Sony doesn't really have like a main mascot, or they haven't had a main mascot in the past like several years or so. And I guess like a game like this kind of reminds, like, casuals of the good old days. And Astrobot was actually being compared to the likes of Super Mario Odyssey, and obviously, Super Mario Odyssey is more popular and it's sold more, but I guess Astrobot is one of the few Sony published games that's not like M rated or team rated or doesn't cater to an adult audience, and I think that's one of the reasons why it stood out the way that it did last year. And Square Enix, they came out with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth last year, and I believe that game got like it got like a meta score of like 92, I believe, and it's ranked number 6, and it's tied with another video game publisher. And I honestly thought this would be a little bit lower in the list, but I feel like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth saved Square Enix from being ranked lower because a lot of their games have been flopping and failing, and they've been losing a lot of money and all that stuff. And it seems like Square Enix is continuing to do everything they can to milk Final Fantasy VII out for as much as they can because nobody really, talks about Final Fantasy 16 that much, or at least they don't talk about it to the same extent as they did when it came out back in 2023. So it makes me wonder what the future of the Final Fantasy franchise is going to look like outside of, the Final Fantasy 7 series. And and yeah, I think Microsoft was ranked number 9 as a publisher. So yeah, I mean, I can't really think of like too many like high profile like games that came out that was published by Microsoft last year, unless we're counting like Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which I believe that's owned by Activision, but as we know, Microsoft, acquired, Activision Blizzard. So technically, they own the Call of Duty franchise. And don't get me wrong, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 was actually a pretty good game. The thing is, I don't know. I feel like oversaturation has in some ways like ruined the Call of Duty series. And it seems like a lot of like diehard fans of the Call of Duty series, they're not really happy because they know that Activision tried to sell them slop in 2023, and then and I believe there was like this project that was going on to mod or to make an updated version of one of the older Call of Duty games, and that project got shut down back in August. So, that was something that pissed a lot of people off. So I feel like between those two things, I feel like a lot of people have kind of they've been unhappy with Microsoft for the most part, or they've been unhappy with Activision, and they've been unhappy with the developers of Call of Duty, and yeah, like I feel like for the most part, like last year was not necessarily a great year for gaming, but it wasn't really a horrible year either. I do feel like Sega definitely shined last year, and I do feel like, along with the games I mentioned earlier, I do feel like the Sonic Generations remake definitely helped Sega get a lot of mainstream attention for the most part because it was the Sonic Generations remake, and then you had Shadow in it, and it pretty much took the Shadow the Hedgehog game and pretty much like remade that and remade all the levels and kind of like made some tweaks to the story and all that stuff. And I feel like that was something that caught a lot of people's attention, and it was something that people were really excited about, especially considering the fact that that came out right before the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie came out. And like for the most part, like Sega has been getting a lot of mainstream attention in 2024, and they had like a lot of like momentum in general. And I do feel like Sega definitely deserves the number one spot as probably the best video game publisher of 2024 because I feel like Sega had a fantastic year, especially when you compare Sega to Nintendo, because when you look at Nintendo, there wasn't really like any high profile video games that came out last year, at least not to my knowledge, other than Super Mario Party Jamboree. And and yeah, like for the most part, seems like Sega I don't know. Sega, I feel like is like in an upward trajectory for the most part because I believe they're supposed to be unveiling some type of super game project in 2026, and they plan on reviving older IPs and stuff like that. And we haven't gotten like release dates for like most of them or anything like that. But a lot of people have high hopes for Sega and their future. We do know we're supposed to be getting a Sonic the Hedgehog 4 movie sometime in the future, and the rumor release year for it is like 2027. But but I think Nintendo's also supposed to be doing a sequel to the Super Mario Brothers movie from 2023 as well, and I'm not exactly sure when that's supposed to be coming out, but for the most part, I don't think Sega is really in direct competition with like Nintendo or anything like that. But I do feel that Sega, for the most part, like like the IPs that they're working with right now are becoming more and more popular, slowly but surely, and and a lot of people are looking forward to Persona 6. That's the big game that people are waiting to see. We have no idea when that game is going to come out. Hopefully, it's going to come out sometime before 2027. We haven't heard any like news or updates or anything like that, but hopefully we'll learn more about that sometime before the end of 2025. But as far as Sega being the best publisher of 2024 is concerned, it's something that I agree with, and it's something that other people might have issue with, and they'll probably favor Bandai Namco or Sony or what have you. But yeah, you can't deny the fact that Sega had a lot of momentum, had a lot of mainstream attention last year, and for the most part, things are looking bright for Sega's future.